This is my own metaphysical understanding of art. I say metaphysical because I want to stress on the fact that this is not scientific theory, nor is it something that I'm stating as a concrete fact of reality. This is but a principle that I've discovered for my own self throughout the years, and it is the principle of perceiving art that I have based my life on. I see creation as the most important thing in a man's life. We may do lots of other things, we may enjoy our existence or suffer its pains, but nothing we ever do or experience is as important as the things that we endeavor to create. The things we leave after we ourselves are gone. The things that we built to outlast us. Whether it's something material or not. Maybe the thing that you create to outlast you is a legacy of deeds, helping reduce people's suffering and making their lives better, be it just your loved ones or people beyond this circle. Maybe the thing that you leave behind is a legacy of ideas, creations of thought and of the word. Or maybe the thing you leave behind is a material creation, something that you built and work on for a long time, inexhaustibly, giving it your everything and investing in it every ounce of love, energy, and dedication. Maybe it's a building, maybe a poem, maybe stories, or music, or sculpture, or a painting. In my case, it's painting. Now, why is it that I perceive painting as something so important to me? And not just to me, but to the world. What is it about painting specifically that has been relevant and valuable to humanity for so many years now, and continues to be even in our modern era? We're in the presence of automation and technology and constantly connected hyperactive human minds, even in such an insanely complex time to be alive. People still like to just dip a simple brush in paint and smear it on a physical surface, just like our ancestors were doing for millennia. Why do we keep doing it? And why do I keep doing it? And not only that, why am I also so in love with it? So as to why it matters to other people generally, this will probably have millions of different answers, but here's my take on it. First of all, people paint as a means of communication, because painting is actually a language. And it's not a language for external communication with others, which is why it doesn't have set rules and words and grammar. Painting is actually the language we use to communicate with our inner selves. There are some things in life, and there are some things in our psyche that verbal languages simply do not have the capacity to express. No matter how much linguistics and verbal expression are perfected throughout the ages, they will never ever be powerful and efficient enough to be able to express what goes on in the deepest layers of our consciousness. And so when a person suddenly feels the creative drive, when they say the muse in them is chasing, it's because they want to express something that's deep within them and express it outwardly. And they don't necessarily consciously know what that is, neither do they know exactly how they want to express it. They just know that they have to. And so they sit down in front of the canvas and start using colors and shapes and nuances, all these things that can't really talk, but are still somehow saying something. When you observe colors, they give you different feelings. When you observe shapes, they affect your thoughts. Images, abstract or otherwise, have the power to affect your emotions and psychology on a level deeper than when just hearing words. If someone told me the mother of 2 children died, I'd be like, oh, that's sad, but it happens. But then if they come to me and show me this painting, my heart is gonna sink and I'll need 2 days to recover. Because the painting speaks louder than any words ever could. And more importantly, again, the purpose of this expression is not necessarily to be able to speak to others, but for us to be able to speak to our inner self, to give our deepest thoughts and emotions a voice. And in a world where outward society molds people into conformists of the mass, hopefully, by giving our deeper consciousness the opportunity to express itself via the language of art, we would be able to not only preserve, but also strengthen the spark of our unique individual self. And now that I covered why I think painting is so important to people in general, let me get back to the smaller picture. Why does painting matter so much to me? Well, first of all, for all of the previous reasons. But there's also a second of all in my case. And this second of all reasons is that painting makes me feel like I'm creating extensions of myself. And these extensions will not only outlast my original self, they will also be preserved as expressions of my higher being. Now, a sane person or someone like Richard Dawkins will say that this is just some word salad mumbo jumbo, so what the hell do I mean? And here's what I mean. First of all, about my paintings being extensions of myself. In order for me to paint, my brain produces neurons, which in turn produce very specific commands, which in turn are sent over to my hand, which in turn performs these very specific and complex movements. And when my hand performs these complex commands, it does so while holding a brush soaked in paint. And this paint-soaked brush leaves a trace on the canvas. And this trace on the canvas is thus a literal record of the neurological links and commands that my brain produces. And this active expression of my brain function is thus caught into a snapshot frozen in time by the trace of paint left on the canvas. The brushstrokes and traces of paint on the canvas are like a visual record of my personality, which states that there once lived a person whose mind left this reflection on the canvas. And to me, that's way more powerful than just leaving something like a photograph of yourself. The photograph is just a light reflection of you meant to depict your outer appearance. The painting you created, the brushstrokes you've left in it, the specific way you've spread and mixed and outlined the features of your painting, this is not just a simple snapshot of what you looked like. This is a snapshot of how your psyche works, of the way your brain works, and a unique way it functions. It's like a frozen GIF of your brain activity. That, in my opinion, is a much more substantial and deeper way of preserving a living memory of yourself. And then I mentioned, this is not just an extension of yourself, but also an extension of your higher self. What do I mean by that? I mean that when painting, you're not just doing some random brushstrokes with your hand. Even when painting abstract art, your hand movements are very deliberate and calculated, especially if you're still a newbie painter and learning. And then later on, as time progresses and you invest more and more time in art, you naturally start to excel in it, and your neural networks for it become more and more refined, which produces more and more complex and refined movements of your hands, producing finer brushstrokes. It's like gradually becoming fluent in a language. You first start out by learning separate words, then a couple of years go by and you can speak freely on the streets, then a few more years pass by and you have no problems reading books and watching television, and then after maybe a decade or so of living with the language, you now have such a brilliant mastery of it that you can grasp even the finest and most subtle prose and poetry. Your brain and your being has achieved its highest form in the medium, and through this mastery you experience the highest levels of expression of this new language. And it's the same with painting. If you're like me, and you've been doing this for years, it's very easy and fascinating to compare, say, one of your first paintings to one of your last, and see the monumental difference, how refined you've become throughout all this time, how much mastery you've achieved of expressing color and contour, and not only in the mere technical aspect of it, you've maybe also achieved high mastery of your psychological method of painting, much like the stuff in the speech that I'm giving you now. If you met me in 2012 and asked me why I paint, I never would have been able to give you this kind of answer. I never would have had this level of ideology of what painting and art are. My having spent so much time painting has made me achieve this level of personal mastery, and so if I compare myself today to what I was all these years ago, I'm literally a more refined version of myself, a higher being than what I was all these years ago. And so when I paint and create these snapshot extensions of my consciousness, not only are they traces of myself, but they're also traces of the highest and most perfect version of myself. If I had to state what my highest goal in life is, my main purpose and ambition, it is to create art in the form of paintings. It is the number one thing in my life, and the first thing that defines me as a person. And so the traces I leave on the canvas are the traces left of the highest form of my being. And to conclude this, let me say, for anyone who might be thinking it, yes, all of this does sound an awful lot like trying to cope with the fear of dying. And to that I say, I can give a lot of personal reasons why that's not the case. But instead of going there, I just want to say that even if, indeed, deep down beneath all of the word salad, coping with mortality is the actual reason, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. The world as we know it today is built on humanity's fear of mortality. Without fear of death, and without trying to cope with it, you never would have had the world religions. You wouldn't have had centuries and centuries of spiritual debate, of religion-based conflicts, of empires rising and falling because of it. You never would have had the Pantheon in Rome, or the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. You never would have had all of the classical world literature that derived from these religions, and so on and so forth. So much of the drama and beauty and complexity of our world was born because of our fear of imminent death. And if my own philosophy was born because of the same fear, then I'm at peace with that. I can even say I am glad of it, because it makes me feel that no matter how antisocial and secluded I tend to be, at the end of the day, I'm still a human being like any other, and I belong in this world, and I can call this world my home.